Hello. Just before this episode begins, the very first episode properly of the podcast, I'd like to say welcome to the world of podcasts in the British Empire since 2001. It's JD Collins and Chris Nichols with their brand new podcast called the British Empire Podcast. Obviously, they know about me, this podcast, Welcome to Whitbury, Newtown, and I know about them, so I'll give them a shout out so that, to go and listen to that. Now, they've got a fantastic theme tune. I'm still trying to work out what to do for my theme tune, so everything you're about to hear is still in work in progress. So, without further ado, let's go and talk about the first ever episode of the British Empire. Ta-ra! Hello, welcome to Whitbury, Newtown. Now, sadly, this episode I haven't managed to catch up with British just yet. I don't know where he is. I've sort of he told me to come home and record this. I've heard that from Carol. She said, she said in a weepy voice, go on, record the podcast for British. And so I went, I will do, but I've never met the fella. So, I'm assuming the Mr. British is a nice guy. So, today we are reviewing Series 1, Episode 1 of the British Empire, a BBC sitcom from the 90s. As I mentioned in the pre-intro, the intro before the musical intro for this, that there's another British podcast out that brings out new episodes every Thursday, and this podcast will be bringing out new episodes every so often. I'm off for summer, so they'll be more frequently than not. So the last episode was 3 months ago. The lunch watch and the tea watch or dinner watch, whichever one you want to call it, is on a roll. It works perfectly, but only a whole third channel the way time video on that. So this I watched from the recording that aired on Dave, so it's available on DVD. Every episode ever is available on DVD. Series 1 to 5 is on UK TV Player. I think Series 1 to 5 is also on BritBox in the UK. So, let's review the episode. Now, first of all, what I want to talk about is the character of British. Chris Barry, who was, I think, left Red Dwarf for a small while to start filming it, but then went back to Red Dwarf to do a multi-mixture. So, his character in the first episode isn't the British you know and you love. Do you like the character? I think Connor Weatherby is his second best character, but that'll be another episode of the podcast for another day. So, what I think when you're looking at the landscape of the show, his character in this episode acts, because he's not it's Chris Barry's first time doing it. Sorry about that error. Now, what's happened there? This is really funny. This is what I want to tell you on the podcast is the monitor I have below that is better than the viewfinder, which is I don't know, that big on the camera. That had died, but I thought I was still recording. So I had recorded the whole video, and I've said all the things I said, and I've said all this, that, the other, and I did it, and I was ready going, woo, and I finished, and I walked off. And then I found out it wasn't recording. I had recorded 3 minutes of it previously, so I know what the last bits were. So what I'm going to do now, because I've explained what's just happened, I'm going to continue talking, but I'm going to start from afresh, if that makes sense. So the last thing I was on about was the British was a different character. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly talk about what I think about certain characters that weren't the same they were in every other episode, and I'm going to discuss my opinion on the episode, and we're going to wrap it up. So it's going to be shorter than I had hoped, but we have got the pre-title intro, the intro, this and that, so it should be a good fun. I do still want to say, if once you finish listening to this, what we're doing town, you can then go listen to JD Collins and Chris Nichols' podcast, The British Empire, J.D. Collins is best known for appearing in Tom's Normal Jockeys on Tom's Comedy Club, appearing in a pilot episode of Rewind the Tape, and for his own podcast, 2.4 Children Podcast, which is all about the British sitcom 2.4 Children. Anywho, so, Chris Barry plays Britus. I can't remember who plays Tim, so them two are here, right? So you have Tim that didn't get enough screen time, and I wish he had. So his character wasn't developed enough. It wasn't really good enough in this episode. It was fantastic in every other episode. Britus was trying to find his feet. Chris Barry was trying to find his feet as an actor, trying to work out what type of performance he wanted to portray, what type of character this Gordon was going to be, Mr. Britus. And so he found his feet towards the end, but every other episode, from episode 2 to the final ever episode, he did a fantastic job. Well done, Chris Barry. It's his first episode, a little bit rocky. I don't know if he did a unaired pilot episode, so I don't know if this was exactly the very first time that Chris got to portray Britus. I don't know. But who knows? If I ever get to meet Chris Barry, I'll want to find out. So, the episode begins with the kids playing in the garden, which we don't see often. We don't see the kids ever again, really. We hear about them. We don't really see, like, a silhouette on the back of them. We've got the next door's child coming in. So we've got Pamela, who is the next door neighbour, who appears in a few episodes of the show, but not enough. So her character was fantastic. Then we've got Britus going into the centre, meeting the builders. There are one-off characters that drop litter that aren't being very nice to Britus or listening to what he's saying. So, and then we go into town, we've got crying Carol. We've got Carol that's in tears, she's upset. Everything's falling apart around her, which is good that everything's falling apart around her, because this is a jumping on point to explain that Carol had a husband and is like, she's got a child 3 weeks earlier, and this is when we learn that she's going to become homeless and she's not going to be able to do this, that, the other, and she's a bit in the situation she gets into in the rest of the show. Next, we've got Tim and Gavin and Linda, because they came as a pair to introduce. Linda didn't really say much, but it was more about the rota. Gavin and Tim, we established that they were friends, and they alluded that they were together as a couple. They alluded to that. It was never mentioned strictly, but it was alluded enough so everyone knew that they were a couple. That had established that from the get-go. We've got the I don't know what he was called. I don't think he had a name, but the one that Britus read out the medical record for, but it turned out he meant for somewhere else, right? So that's one bit. So we have staff member that we don't know the name of, I think. We don't meet really, and we never see again. We've got the cleaner who had to go re-clean the front reception, and she's left, so we lose her again. We have Carol learning how to smile, saying, "How can I help you?" whilst still in tears. And we've got Laura, which when we recorded this first time, I forgot her name. We've got Laura, deputy manager, doing a splendid job as always. We've got we've got Colin. So we've learned who Colin is, what Colin is, and what the motivation is of this character. So he's always got something wrong with him. He's not very good at much else other than the job he gets assigned to. So he's good at one thing rather than multiple things like other people are in this case. What else? We have the table tennis disaster that has no table tennis on the rota, and then we have the battle at the end where he's hurtling these sharpened table tennis rackets and the table tennis table. So we've got a conflict of interest at the very end where Britus wants to bring them home. The only person in this, other than Laura, now I think about it, that stays the way they are, so they're portrayed the same, is Helen Brittis. Now, Carol, I can't remember who plays Carol. She's recently joined the cast of EastEnders, but I don't watch EastEnders, so I don't really know much about that. But what I do want to say is I was watching a 2017 episode of Casualty, and she was in it. She was in it. Like, Carol was in an episode of Casualty. So I watched the episode of Casualty before I watched the episode of British. She was in it. Wow. So overall, I think the episode, as it started for a sitcom, welcomed the sitcom very well. It's a good introduction to a sitcom. It made you want to stick around. It wants to draw you in. Not a lot of sitcom openings want to draw you in. All of them like, haha, that was really funny. And then the next one, and it's like you laugh at it and you watching, and it's like a laughing episode. But this is more of a, here's a world that you're going to get sucked into. You want to see how Richard reacts to any situation that he gets thrown in. And is he happy? Is he excited? What was going to happen to the world of British? Because, like most sitcoms, it's an issue of the week type thing. This is a Gordon's the way he is, and Helen knows about it, right? They've moved in a brand new centre. That stays with you for the first series. Then you have Carol throughout the show. She has her ups and downs of being left. But babies, husband, partner leaves or whatever, homeless and all that. That it stays with throughout the whole of the show. So you got a sort of arc. I wouldn't say it's an arc, but it's a sort of arc. So it sticks with you. And this episode in itself works really well. My favourite moment of the episode is the table tennis fight. And I do think it's the bit at the very beginning where you see the kids how to play cricket against the need by one of the children. They're the two favourite bits. Favourite character of this episode is British. Even though he's not as he is in every other episode, it's still a fantastic introduction of this wild, interesting, out of this world type character. But anyway, let's give my final thoughts. Let's go in this series of podcasts, in these episodes. I'm going to rank them from 1, which is terrible, to 10, which is amazing. So we haven't had an amazing episode yet, because it's the first one. We haven't had a terrible episode. Because of the way it's introduced everyone, we've got Councillor Dappin, who appears in a few episodes, we introduce her, and how she now wants to get rid of Ritus. We meet Colin for the first time. We are these wonderful people. I'm going to rate this episode an 8. It's not terrible, but it's not at the 10 standard I would give it. And so, that is the end of this podcast. Next time, because it's not weekly, next time I'll hopefully hunt down Mr. Brutus to try and get him to record a little bit of a speech or write a note for me to read out on the podcast. Hopefully, I will hunt him down. Because Carol just sent me along, if you remember. She sent me along to do this, so I haven't actually met Mr. British yet. So, make sure you also listen to the British Empire podcast by J.D. Collins and Chris Nichols, because that is also a fantastic podcast. Thank you guys for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, on the Weird Side, or if you're watching this on Spotify, thank you guys for listening. If you listen every other podcast platform, I've got a desk in front of me for all you listening viewers. Let's find out if I injure myself on my way out, because I normally do. Thank you guys for watching. Bye. I'm listening. Ta-ra.